In setting up a new bullet journal, it can be tricky to know what to include or what you're actually going to use. So today we're looking through all of my journal setup pages to help give you some ideas. When I say all, I do mean all, so starting at the start of my bullet journaling journey, the very first start of journal page that I made was a goals list. And that was actually it. That was the entire of my start of journal setup. I was new, I didn't know any better, I didn't know that I needed more. You can also note that I started in November, so I didn't really want to set up a bunch of pages for the last 2 months of the year. What's probably better to look at is my new year setup. So we had a welcome page for the year, or hello 2017, and then after this we had my future log, or what I was calling a yearly overview. The future log style that I went with had the numbers 1 through 31 running down the page, and a column for each of the months. So we have the first 6 months here, and then the second 6 months here. After this, my next spread had my big goals for the year ahead, and also an affirmations page. While goals are something that I continue to include in my journal, affirmations, not so much. After this, we had a savings tracker, which you can see did get filled in, and this one was a weight loss tracker, which did not get filled in, because I didn't lose any weight. NSV stands for non-scale victory, and then after this we had my movies seen list, or kind of like a media consumed but just for movies, and I also wanted to make one of those bookshelf pages that everybody does, but I only read one book, so didn't really use that one. After this we have a meal planner page, so Saturday through Friday, which might seem a little bit odd, but typically we did our meal planning on Saturday, so it made sense to start this on Saturday. And as you can see, each of these are little sticky notes, so I could switch them out for the meals that we typically eat. I also wanted to track our meals, so I had a bunch of little Dutch doors here, which were folded Dutch doors. So we have January, February, March, April, etc. As you can see, fell away with actually using this, but part of the reason would be that I didn't have the full year in this journal, so at least once we got to June I was in my new journal, but I didn't really use this for April or May either. I also had a little key here to describe whether we actually ate the meals that we had planned or not. And then the next spread was a cleaning list. I really like this, and at the time people on social media really liked it as well, but I did not use it because I don't like doing chores. Flipping over though, our next one is a wish list, or a things I want page. I think 3 columns was a little ambitious. I don't want that many things. And then I also have an experiences wish list, or things that I want to do rather than things I want to buy. We had a monthly habit tracking overview, which I still think is a cool idea, but you really have to be kind of solid on which habits you're going to track. I have more of a tendency to change which habits I'm tracking in any given month. I also gave myself a waiting on list, or kind of like a package tracker, but typically if I'm waiting on something, I get an email about it, so I just put it in a folder in my email inbox rather than writing it down here. We also had my Songs of 2017, or Songs of the Year page, which again I like the idea of, but I never filled it in. This one here was a card from a student, a particularly nice one, so I kept it in here for any time I was feeling down. And then the last page of the setup was a reflection questions reference. Armed with a better understanding of what I do and don't use, I set up my second bullet journal and started off with a key page. A key isn't something I typically set up nowadays. I kind of know which symbols I like to use, but for my second bullet journal it wasn't a bad idea. After this we have a calendex, which is a type of future log, but it's a cross between a calendar and an index. I have more information about this style in my video on future logs. Flipping over, we had another one of those goal pages, so taking the 10 areas of my life and trying to write out my goals for each of them, but as you can see, some of them didn't get filled in. I guess I just don't have any personal development goals. That is such a lie. We then have my 101 things to do list, which is something I do very much like. For this one, I tried to split it into the different areas of life, so family and friends, personal development, etc. But as you can see, I didn't actually end up going and putting in 101 things. That's probably part of the reason why I've since stepped away from having them in specific life areas. I don't need 10 things dedicated to health and fitness. On the next page, we have a savings tracker, which I actually quite like. I should probably do that again. And then I very optimistically gave myself a full page for the books that I've read. I read 2 books. I also noted that I didn't write down a place of things to read, so this was kind of like a last minute addition at some point while I was using this journal. After this though, we have my movies watched, which did get a lot more use. I watch more movies than I read, obviously. The wish list made a return, and I drew a little lamp here because it's like genies and wishes. I'm very clever. After this we have my Instagram tracker, so tracking how many followers I had on my Instagram. I also wrote 703 here so that I knew what color of pen I was using, so that as I filled in the tracker I didn't change color halfway through. We have the moon cycle page, which is just another name for my period tracker. I just thought the name sounded a little bit more cute. Then I was trying my hand at a cycling challenge, and I decided to pick a specific show and use it to be my cycling show, so I could only watch episodes of the show if I was doing cycling. The show I picked was Pretty Little Liars, and I didn't like it, so I didn't do this. Yeah. We have a TV show tracker for shows that were not related to cycling. That one was much more successful. And then to finish off the start of journal pages here, I just had a quote page. Something that I think is important to do with each new journal setup is reflect on the things that did and didn't work from the prior one so that you know what to include or what not to include. Some layouts I do give the good college try though. I try them multiple times. So in this one we have a little flip out key, but this is a color key rather than the icons of different signifiers. This is where I was trying to use these specific colors for each of these life areas. And I also wrote in brackets what pen number they were, just as a helpful reference. Flipping over though, we have some pictures, pretty cute, because these are the pages before the index that comes pre-printed in the LT 1917s. But the first page that I actually set up was a cover page for the year, so 2018, and my word of the year was improve. For the future log, I again went with a calendex style. So we have January through to August, and then we have the next 4 months here. We then had a page for all of the dates that I was pulling over from my last journal. So you can see all of these are listed on page number 5. So anywhere there's a box on the calendex that says number 5, it relates to this list. After this, we have another iteration of a goals layout. This one was 52 goals in 52 weeks, so not 101 things this time. I did actually fill in all of the goals, I think, or at least what the goals were. I didn't necessarily complete all of the goals, but, you know, it doesn't look too bad. And then after this, we have my term planners. So this year I quit being a teacher, but previously I have been a teacher in a more traditional sense, like in a classroom. So these term planners were one of my go-to layouts. I use them in pretty much every bullet journal since my first one. It's just they didn't necessarily make it into my start of journal setup. Oftentimes I'd put them in the back of the journal instead, but this time you can see I did put them at the front. This week in particular I think wasn't in here because the life of this journal didn't actually last until these weeks. So I set these up again in the next journal to capture these weeks. We again have a savings tracker, which I still think I should bring back a savings tracker. And changing out moon cycle for the header Tom, or time of month, we have my period tracker and an attempted cleaning tracker that just really highlights how much more housework Vogel, my partner, does compared to me. Flipping away from that one, you can see that I didn't actually set anything up on this page, and then we're into January. Stepping away from the LT 1917 and getting into the scribbles that matter, this one also comes with a pre-printed index space and a pre-printed key for both your bullet code and your color codes. So I put those ones in. But in terms of the first page that I actually set up, that one was the future log. For this future log, I included mini calendars for each of the months that the journal was actually going to capture. And although I started this journal in July, I started the future log on August because I didn't really need to have a space for future events for July, because when I got into this journal, July was already set up. So the future log, and then after this we have my goals page, just super simple, putting it in as a list. Another savings tracker with a little key here for the colors that I was using. And then after this one, we have my Tom, or time of month tracker, and that was it. We didn't do a lot of start of journal pages in this one. What I did set up for myself at the back of the journal though was a class countdown for terms 3 and 4, and then those term planner pages that I was talking about before. So the ones that didn't get filled in the last journal got populated here. Our next one was another Scribbles That Matter with a whole heap of awesome at the front, it seems. Again, we've got the index, the key pages that are pre-printed, and then the first actual layouts we set up were the future log. So a very similar style to the last one, but I found that I didn't use this one quite as much. After this we have a goals layout, and again I tried to break it down into different life areas. You can see that some of them have more goals than others. Now I probably could have fit all of this onto one page, but I don't know, room to breathe or something. Flipping over, we have the savings and spending logs. So the savings is the idea of like, what money did I have coming in each month and what money did I have going out each month. So the length of the bars I could compare to see which months I spent more than I saved, that kind of stuff. And then my spending tracker here was kind of like a year in pixels, where each of the colors represents a certain amount of spending. So the closer to purple we get, the less I spent that day. I also noted that groceries and bills don't count. We have my to consume or media consumed page, which kind of combines the idea of media that was consumed and things that I should check out. So a dot meant that I should check it out, and a cross meant that I did check it out. We have a wish list with 2 columns, which probably only needed 1, but I like the balance that this having 2 columns and that having 2 columns has. And then after this we have my social media planner and growth tracker. So what videos did I want to put out, and how did my accounts grow over the time frame of this year? We of course have my term planner because, as I said, this was one that I really relied on. I just really like this layout. It was so super helpful for teaching. But that one goes on for a few pages, and then we have the Tom tracker again, or getting my bleed on. We had a health tracker here for weight loss that didn't really get used, healthy meals that I did not log, challenges that I wanted to complete that were related to healthy things, which I did for the first 3 months, but not the rest of them. And then just a page for notes to myself. Having this one pre-set up was kind of nice because as I went through the life of this journal, I could just chuck things down here. Like this very important note that says, "You don't like roti from Tulsi," because I would find myself repeatedly ordering it and just not enjoying it and being like, wait, you already knew that. Taking what I learned about my journaling practice into the next notebook. This one is a dingbat, so timetable, nameplate page. On this one I put a full page quote just using a brown paper bag, and then also put a couple of other quotes here as I collected them throughout the life of the journal. It has a pre-printed key for both colours and for signifiers, and also the index, again pre-printed, thus I used it, though didn't use that much of it. And then we're into my goals page. So interestingly we start with goals here rather than the future log, which we did in the previous journals. We have my 20 before 2020, not that I filled the last 3 in, so more like 17 before 2020. And I also had a place to write down the dates that I achieved those things. Flipping over, we then have the future log, which also came with this year at a glance separate, so place for the mini calendars, and then a log of the events that were coming up. I really liked the style of this with the brown paper bag. We again had a countdown to the end of the year for each of my different classes, and then the term schedule, because we love the term schedule, so that one features in pretty much all of my journals up until quitting teaching. The Tom tracker came back. I now do this digitally, so I don't really have a Tom tracker in my later journals. Our money pages together, so a bills tracker with a little line graph, though these bills got a little bit higher than the tracker itself. And then a savings tracker. We had the monthly challenges, which we bought back, and for this one I was trying to do 2 challenges per month. So one that was money related, I think, and one that was health related, something like that. And in this journal I was also trying my hand at challenges for each week in terms of my weekly setups, because I was getting a little bit bored with them. So things like a pen only or a colours I hate weekly. We had my media to check out and consume page, and my wish list, which I do eventually move out of these bullet journals. I put them in a different journal. And we also have an ideal week. Now, I don't think the header really matches the information here, because in my ideal week, I would not have a staff meeting on a Monday. I put in this collection of self-care ideas, so ideas for different types of self-care you can do. Physical self-care, social self-care, your environment or space. I quite like this reference. And then the last page in this setup was a notes to self. That's probably something I could bring back. In 2020, this is where I started using Archer and Olive notebooks, and this year I was also using a teacher planner, so some of my regular teaching stuff isn't actually in here, but we had my word of the year, or rather words of the year, what they meant, why I chose them. After this, we have the year at a glance, but for the future log, I was finding that the future log styles I'd used previously didn't really feel like they were working for me. So instead, I was trying my hand at doing a monthly log or like a monthly calendar for each of the months. Not to say that I used that very much, but I also found it really hard to use my journal in the start of 2020, mainly because of that aforementioned teacher planner. Pulling my teaching stuff out of my journal didn't do super well for actually having me use my journal. This one is an extension of that future log, so rather than having more monthly calendars for July through to December, I just put that in a list here. We also had an on the monthly page, or tasks that I wanted to do once per month, and tracking having done those. And then on this next page we have my 20 in 2020, though I did not fill in 20 things. And again, we have that milestones page for that one. I brought back those pages related to content creating, so my YouTube schedule and growth on different social media platforms. And then after this, we have a weight loss tracker that I actually filled in. And although it was very up and down, technically speaking, I lost like a kilo, so I will take that as a win. We had the first iteration of my weekly reset, which I was calling weekly review tasks. So things that I wanted to do at the end of each week to get ready for the next one. And then after that, we're into January. Given that I'd found using my last journal to be so difficult, I really wanted to test that and decided to use a Neapolitan for my next one. But this one started off with a quote page. I usually do like to start with a quote page on this first page of the notebook because not really good for many other things, maybe a year at a glance. We then have the future log. I really liked the style, but I did not use it. I had like 4 things in total, so yeah. This is when I started to question whether I really needed a future log. After this one, we have my 20 things to do in 2020, which I did actually fill in and start coloring in. I really like this layout. I think it looks pretty nifty. Flipping over, we then had my YouTube schedule, which I tried a different layout with. I don't think I liked this layout quite as much. I think I preferred the one that I had previously, but you know, it's good to try new things. We also had my Instagram schedule, which I started well. I did not finish well. Previously, this had been on my monthly setup as a kind of content schedule for the month, so pulling them into the starter journal pages didn't really work out. As you can see, November and December did not get touched, but I did have the countdown page for my classes, which I did fill in. After this, we have my weight loss tracker, which obviously I hit this part and was like, you know what, maybe I don't need to track that anymore. I have an interesting relationship with weight loss trackers. I seem to keep trying to include them and then just being really bad about filling them in, but it's fine. I again tried to include the monthly challenges, though did not get very far. I think this book I started reading and then realized it was not what I thought it was going to be, so that didn't happen. That probably didn't happen. That might have, but I don't know. And then didn't fill it in for the rest of the month, so this style of monthly challenge page didn't work out. We then have my year-long trackers, which I also just never turned back to, so that was a learning moment. This does not work for me. And then after this, we have the LTP or long-term project list. Have I done any of these? Approximately 9 of them have now, but I'm not going to check them off. Noting that the Neapolitan had not quite worked, I started a new white notebook. So timetable, which I typically liked to have in the start of my journal as an easy reference. We have the quote page to use up that start of journal page that's stuck to the front card. And then we have my year at a glance. You can see we didn't include a future log in this one because I wasn't using it, so I figured I'd try not having one. We have the word of the year though, and the word that I chose for that year was freedom. again with the little description of what the word meant and why I chose it. And after this we have the return of the 101 things list. It may seem like I didn't get to 101, but when I transferred this list into my next journal, I did have the full list. We then have my 21 21s in 2021, which I really loved, and I have done it every year since. I say it like it's been more than just 2 years of doing it. I've set one up for 2023 as well though. We also have my media consumed page, so movies, books, classes, and shows, and I intentionally set it up like this because I knew that the books list was going to be short and the movies list was going to be bigger. So by having the header at the bottom, I could work from the bottom of the page up. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. We have the monthly and weekly reset pages, or the first iteration of at least calling them resets, which is still something that I do like to include in my journal. And then we have my social media tracker, or like tracker in terms of my icons that I use for my workflows and my statistics in terms of growth, or lack of growth where Instagram's concerned. On this one we have the then and now page, or what I'm now calling the then and again page. So writing down a response to these prompts on the first day of having used the journal and the last day of having used the journal. And then this page here was just a place to outline what my themes were for the months in this journal. I do wish I had done a better job of drawing the rainbow and the bee in though, because these ones look a little bit strange compared to what I actually did on my setup. As part of the initial setup, I also had my teaching pages in the back, so we have a teaching related year at a glance, and then those term planner pages in pretty much the same format that I used last time. Certainly a favorite. I kind of miss them, honestly. Like, I don't necessarily miss having to do all the lesson planning and stuff, but the layout itself pleased me. Coming into what is probably one of my all-time favorite start of journal setups, this one I did a pegboard theme, so the grid in the back and then the craft paper and the little bits of greenery. This one was kind of like an intro splash page with some little goals that I had for this part of the year. Little Polaroid pictures, so cute. We have the return of the future log and the minimal use of it. I did at least use these months, I didn't really use these months. After that one though, we then have the 101 things list in full. So you can see I actually wrote out all 101 things, even if I didn't necessarily complete all 101 things. After this, we have the 21 21s in 2021 continued, so rewriting that out here, and my media consumed along the side here. I just love the pegboard layout, and this color palette was so pretty. We have another weight loss tracker, which obviously again, I went onto an up and then just like stopped tracking it. Wah wah. We had some other you can do hard things, health related stuff. This one was for steps tracking, I think. I obviously didn't really end up tracking it after, what is this, October 3rd? It's because it was Mean Girls Day, I couldn't possibly track my steps after that. The monthly challenges, attempted to bring back, didn't really work out. We also had my on the monthly again, but I was just calling it monthly tasks, which I didn't really use, but I still liked the setup. My social media stats page I also didn't really use. And then I had my planning routines page for my daily, weekly, and monthly planning routines. After this one, we then have my then and again page. You might be able to see that I did accidentally spill some Coke on my journal, so we have a little bit of smudgings. And here we have, I guess, the first iteration of the someday maybe list. So these are tasks that I want to do someday, maybe. They're tasks that I want to get done, but not necessarily this day, or this week, or this month. After this one though, we then have my theme planning pages. Prior to this notebook, they weren't at the front of my journal, they were either at the end of each individual month or at the end of my journal. And again, in the back we had my teaching related pages, though I changed up the style of my countdown, and I also included a term at a glance, so term 3 at a glance and term 4. These ones were really helpful and I did end up using those again. Coming into 2022, I liked the pegboard layout so much that I had to do it again. So we have a Hello 2022 page with just some little Polaroid kind of picture doodle things and some little pieces of craft paper. Flipping over, we had my word of the year, which was jump. Again, putting in the definition and why I picked it. In terms of my goals page, I just had a page to outline what those goals were, or what I wanted to accomplish, and then on the subsequent spread I outlined how I wanted to achieve them, but that one's a little personal, so we're going to skip over that one. We do have the 101 things list, which I did on a Dutch door, and I really liked this layout in particular because I only had to do the header once, didn't have to cram everything in, which was really nice, so I used this layout again for my 101 things list for 2023. Flipping over though, after this we have my 22 22s in 2022, or 22 things 22 times. I also included some pages to track what those things were, but I didn't actually include space to track every single one, so like movies, documentaries, TV shows, but some of these don't have a section dedicated to them. That kind of bothered me, so I have changed that for 2023. After the 22 22s though, we then have my weight loss tracker loss. Technically it's a loss, but I stopped tracking in August, so yeah. Whoops, not gonna make that mistake again. She lied. I'll probably end up setting up another one, but not anytime soon. This one here is my no fast food tracker, and I was doing so well at the start of the year, and then I either stopped tracking it, which is what these black dots mean, or I just kind of went takeout crazy. The reading challenge has gone much better though, because I'm actually hosting a book club this year. I've actually been reading some books, so good for me on that one. And the monthly challenges, some of them have a challenge, but this year I've done a little differently in that if I had a month where I didn't do a challenge, I didn't necessarily let that derail me for the months that come after that. So for instance, in March I didn't have a challenge, but I picked it back up again in April. We had a space for my reset checklists, and while I did write down the one for my weekly reset, I still haven't written the one for my monthly, and I'm probably not going to, because there's really not that much time left until 2023. We have the then and now page, again, and I filled in the then because that was the 1st of January, but as of current, the 31st of December is yet to happen. An addition that we haven't seen before is a letter to myself, which is just tucked in here, but that is for New Year's Eve Jess to read, not for me right now Jess. While that one was my yearly collections journal, this one is my everyday bullet journal, not the one that I actually use for my tasks and to-dos on a daily basis. So we've got the nameplate and the timetable. After this we have a moments page, which I had good intentions with. The idea was that I'd kind of use it for memory keeping for each of the months that this journal was going to house, but I didn't fill it in beyond January, so haven't brought that one back since. The future log we kept nice and simple, so just a little space for each of the months with the header on the side. I really like the lettering style I used here. I think that's really pretty, and I like the gold. It's pretty too. We have a level 10 life check-in, so each of the different areas, the little gold dots represents the rating that I gave it, and then I just did a little bit of journaling to describe why I gave it that rating. I also had a space for a quarterly goal plan, but didn't necessarily fill that one in or utilize it very well. And then after this we have my meal planner, which again, I didn't really use it as much as I had hoped to, but I like the idea of it, or the concept. I just needed to size the boxes so that they actually fit sticky notes in them without me having to trim the sticky notes down. That would have been helpful. We have a check this out page, which I can technically check that off because I have checked it out. My someday maybe list, which is a fair bit smaller than I would probably need for a someday maybe list nowadays. And then a page for my next journal. Now I did technically include this in my previous journals, they just weren't part of my start of journal setup. After this one though, we then have my theme planning pages for each of the months in this journal. And then after that, we are on to my teaching related stuff. There was a page here, it was a detachable year at a glance so that I didn't have to write it out again and again. And then we're into the term overview for term 1. And each of the weeks got their own separate spread, which I liked trying it out. I was kind of trying to mimic the idea of a teacher planner that you might get that's pre-printed, but I didn't really use it as much as I had hoped to. So in future journal setups, or rather just the next one, because after that I quit teaching, I tweak this layout so I don't waste as much space. Into the age of experimentation, because the next notebook I used was a B5 rather than an A5. Up until this point I'd only used A5s. So we have the timetable, but much bigger, and we have a little flip out here for my weekly reset process, so that it was easily referenceable regardless of where I was in my notebook. Flipping on this first page I included a quote, because again this page is a little weird, it's stuck to that piece of card. And then after that we have a grid spacing guide. The reason that I included this in this journal in particular is because I wasn't used to the size of the B5, so having a handy reference for how to split the page into different sections, very helpful. We also have my key, which previously I hadn't really included since my second journal, but I was trying to get a little bit better about actually using these signifiers in particular, so I decided to put them in this one. And after this we have a future log, going back to a more vertical style, so 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, and again making it start the month after the first month in the journal. So this journal was starting in May, so I started the future log in June. Flipping over though, the next collection we have for my start of journal setup was the level 10 life, and it was supposed to have many actions, but I never filled them in. We then also have a goal action plan. I really like this. I didn't necessarily refer back to it as much as I would have liked to, but this is something that I do want to continue doing. After this one, we had my meal cheat sheet, or a place that I could reference anytime we needed to do meal planning, because I swear anytime we do meal planning, I'm just like, what do I even eat? What do I enjoy? That is what this list is for. I had a space to write in any monthly challenge ideas I had, probably a bit too much space on this page for how big the list actually ended up being, but that is okay. This spread was dedicated to the J&R book club, so we have the books that we read, gave them a little rating, wrote down some book ideas in general, the rules for the book club. I like this layout. I think it's very cute. I don't think I'd necessarily include it in another journal setup, like I don't need this much detail, but I do like the layout. Media consumed, which I do like and I will continue to include in my start of journal setups. And after this we have the someday maybe list with a lot more space. After this journal I do actually end up renaming that collection, but the next one we have is the my next journal setup. So a place to just review what I did and didn't like about working in this journal, and a place to map out what I wanted to include in my next one. Very helpful. We then have my teaching related pages, and here is that tip-in that I talked about before. So having that detachable tracker meant that I didn't have to write it out again when I got to this planner, which was very helpful. Underneath this one we have some student information, marking list, timeline, not gonna show you that stuff. We have the term 2 overview, which very helpful layout. If I was still a teacher, I would continue to use this. And then we have those weekly overviews, which I did more in that kind of week by week view rather than that term overview layout, just because you can include a little more information on these ones. Plus, in the B5 I had so much space that I could totally utilize it in this way. The last thing that I included here was an end of term countdown, which was technically an end of teaching countdown, but I didn't want to give it away and give it a title like that. And then we have my theme planning pages. I would technically like to have included these before the teaching stuff, but I'm still happy they're in here. Moving in just a little bit closer, because for this journal I'm working in a B6, so a lot smaller, but again I have that little tip-in or that little door with the weekly reset checklist. Very helpful. And after this I again started with a quote page. I'm probably going to do this for like every new journal setup from now on out because I just like it. I think it's a nice way to start the new notebook. Flipping over though, we have the future log, using a similar style to what we've used before. And then because this is only 6 months, I then have an additional future log, which I haven't populated anything for yet because I haven't got any events that far out at this stage. But it is here as spillover if I need it. And we have the mini calendars for those months, just for a reference. After this, we have the on the monthly page, not that this has a header, and I also have a weekly routines page. I haven't really used either of these as much as I would like to, but I still like the idea of the pages. So there's a place to write out the things I want to do once a month, and a place for things that I want to do once per week on specific days. Flipping over, we have my level 10 life check-in, which I'm planning to include at the start of my new journals moving forward, just so I have those key points as references for seeing my progress in these areas. We have another quote page because I didn't want to put the next setup, which is kind of action plan for my goals, here because I wanted a full spread for it. Not that I've used the full spread, but that's okay. I think I needed to be better about filling these in at the very start of the life of this journal, which I didn't do. I think the layout could technically work for me, but I just need to actually use it. We have my media consumed and check this out page. I put these two together because I thought they were very much related to one another, considering everything on my check it out page is media. And then our next one is for my book club books, but I haven't printed out their covers yet. Another quote page to fill in space. I probably wouldn't include so many quotes in a typical journal setup. It's just because this journal is smaller, so layouts that I could have previously had on one page and fit in here, I wanted to have on full spreads or something like that. Flipping over though, we have my content schedule for September, and I have a little calendar for each of the months for the rest of the year. So October, November, and December. And I think I will do this again because I actually quite like it. I think it's going to be easier in a bigger journal though, because B6 is really little. Here we have the leveled up version of the Someday Maybe list, now called Future Me Problems. If we get this out of the way, you can see I've set that one up on a Dutch door, so I have plenty of space to write those things down. After this, we have my next Bujo list, so layouts that I want to include in my next Bujo, planning out my next journal, and then my theme planning pages for each of the months housed in this notebook. You'll note no teaching related layouts in this one because life changed, not teaching anymore. That brings us to my 2023 setup, which has some of the pages that we've already talked about and a couple of new ones. If you wanted to see the full setup of that one, it is linked at the top here. Or if you wanted more inspiration for your start of journal setup, then the playlist at the bottom is where it's at. I'll see you over there.